Good afternoon. It's now my honor to award the Tikvah's inaugural prize for leadership and ideas. Leadership and ideas, because that's what this conference is all about. And one would be hard-pressed to find someone more appropriate to name such a prize than Theodor Herzl. Because it was Herzl more than anyone else, with his courageous leadership and inspiring vision, who brought the dream of the State of Israel to fruition. Herzl was not one of the Alice in Wonderland, Lewis Carroll school of thought, and he wasn't a believer in that school of thought, which held that there's no use in trying. It's impossible to believe in impossible ideas. Herzl did understand that he had undertaken what appeared to be an impossible dream. One of the most complex challenges in Jewish history, the return of his people to a homeland where they, their ancestors, hadn't lived for almost 2,000 years. His big breakthrough occurred in 1896. Herzl published his seminal book, which is read to this day, Der Judenstaat. 8 years later, just 8, in 1904, he died from an incurable heart condition at the age of 44. Looking back at his short life, one gets the sense that it was providential. 13 years after his death, the Balfour Declaration was issued by the British government. 30 years later, Herzl's vision, if you will it is no dream, came alive. The State of Israel was born. As for whom we're honoring with the Tikvah's inaugural prize, the answer is someone who more than lives up to what the prize is all about and what this conference stands for. Anatoly Borisovich Sharansky was born in the Ukraine in 1948. On July 4th, 1974, a date not chosen by accident, I'm sure, this 26-year-old, wizard-like chess-playing mathematician was joined in marriage to Natalia Stieglitz, age 24. These two young Soviet Jews had to get married that day, as the bride had little more than a day remaining on her exit visa. The day after marriage, the bride left for Israel, and the groom expected to follow within a few months. Sadly, Sharansky's application to leave the country was denied. And within 3 years, he was sent to Siberia, where he was in prison for 8 more years. Incredibly, it took 12 years before the bride and groom would be reunited. Upon sentencing, Natan Sharansky was asked if he had anything to say. To the court, I have nothing to say. To my wife and the Jewish people, next year in Jerusalem. But there is another significant person, unfortunately unable to attend the award ceremony. Avital Sharansky deserves a very significant share of this award, of this breathtaking bust. She traveled tirelessly all over the world in those 8 years, pleading her husband's case for freedom. I can remember the moving photograph of Avital and President Reagan in the White House. Finally, on February 11th, 1986, Natan Sharansky was released from prison. Avital's efforts were rewarded. One day later, at age 38, Natan's life began in earnest upon arrival at Ben Gurion Airport. Over the next 30-plus years, Natan Sharansky has been tireless in his quest to strengthen the Jewish state. He worked for 4 successive prime ministers, formed the first Russian immigrant political party, fought against, and many times the most important things in life are what you fought against rather than what you are for. He fought against the Oslo Accords, fought against the idea of dividing Jerusalem, fought against returning Gaza to the Palestinians. He's authored 3 books. 2 were bestsellers in the United States, and recently he ended his term having served as chairman of the Jewish Agency. During this period, he also became a moral champion for human rights and democratic ideals, not only for Jews anywhere in the world, but everyone around the world who wanted and cared about those fundamental rights. This prompted the United States Congress to award him, a citizen of Israel, I might note, the Congressional Gold Medal in 1986, and then 20 years later, George W. Bush awarded him the Presidential Medal of Freedom. This is why we are so honored to honor Natan. Like Theodor Herzl, he proved once again what one man with courage, both physical and moral, and the dedication to the flourishing and security of the Jewish people and the Zionist state can achieve in a relatively short period of time. Wonders can happen. With that, ladies and gentlemen, may I ask you, even though you're at lunch still and eating, please let us stand for one and welcome to the platform Natan Sharansky. We're fortunate enough to have with us, he does double duty here. He gave a lecture before, now we get him to do something again, all for the same price. Elliott Abrams is going to engage with Natan in a conversation. Please enjoy yourself.
Thank you, Roger. Thanks, everyone, for being here. I would only add one detail that I think is correct to the facts that Roger laid out, which was that arriving 12 years after Avital had gotten to Israel, Natan greeted her by saying, "Sorry to be late." One other fact, it's true, isn't it, that you were born in Stalino?
Yeah,
Stalino, wonderfully named town. I was thinking, you spent 9 years in the Gulag and 9 years in the Jewish Agency, and I have to ask, which was worse?
I have to correct you. I spent 9 years in prison, 9 years in the government, and 9 years in Jewish Agency. And I can tell you for sure, without no doubt, the easiest was prison. Because I can explain why. It's very simple. Because it is from the moral point of view, such a pure place. Here are friends, here are enemies, here is good, here is evil. And you say to KGB no, and by this you did all Taryag mitzvot. You understand? 613 mitzvot Jew is supposed to do. Who can do it? And in prison, you said no to KGB, that's it. You did everything. In the government, it's impossible. That's why, look, I never resigned from prison, and I was in 4 prisons, and I never resigned. I I was in 4 governments, and I resigned twice. So it says something.
There is a, you said back, it's 20 years ago now, 1997, frankly speaking, I'm not enjoying politics at all. Look, I never wanted to be a prisoner of Zion. I never wanted to be a member of the Knesset. I only wanted to be an international chess champion.
That's true.
Life didn't work out that way. Now you're going to be teaching. And you told me a little bit about what you're teaching about, and that is what I wanted to ask you about. This question that's arising now, I guess we'd say nationalism and freedom. You said about the political upheavals in the Western world, all people want and need 2 things, to be free and to belong. It may seem contradictory, but you went on to explain why it's not. Could you explain?
Well, yes, it is. When I was finally released from prison, it was so obvious to me that our victory shows to all the world how freedom and identity go together. Because after all, it is only those can fight successful dictatorship for whom there are things which are more important than their physical survival. It's people with identity, national identity, religious identity. And in prison it was so obvious that only those they can be Armenian nationals, Ukrainian nationals, Christians from Lithuania, Muslims from Crimea, there must be some kind of deep faith or deep solidarity with some history, with some group of people, in order you will be ready to risk your life. So on the other hand, no doubt that it is desire of people to be free, but in the end defeated Soviet Union. Simply, the dictatorship cannot forever keep millions of people as double thinkers. At some moment, you're losing control over them. So it was such a simple advice: keep identity and freedom together. And then we are coming to free world. And by the way, I have to, now that the prize is secured, I can tell the truth. I never considered myself conservative. I felt very strongly that I'm liberal, because who was liberal in the Soviet Union? Who was for human rights and who believed that human rights must be in the center of international relations. And then I'm coming and find out that in Europe, and also in Israel, to some extent, but in Europe, nationalism is a bad word. Religion is a bad word. The greatest dream is to have the world without nationality, religion, God, government. I quote, of course, John Lennon, the world in which there is nothing to die for. So if there is nothing to die for, then there is nothing to live for. And so, and liberal world that I felt very strongly that I'm part of it, somehow decided that the highest liberal value is peace. But that's exactly what communists were saying. That's exactly how communists were dealing with the West, trying to convince them not to compete and not to impose on them anything about human rights. And so one disappointment was, of course, that nationalism and religion and the family values and all the things that kept us fighting in Soviet Union somehow are becoming unpopular, and as if it is almost against liberal world. On the other hand, I have to say, that's why I never felt myself conservative. I felt myself neoconservative. That on the other hand, the linkage of the policy, of the national policy to human rights was becoming less and less popular in the West. So on one hand, we have Europe, which sacrifices nationalism for the sake of freedom. They say in order to be free, we have to stop all our national wars, and that's why we have to overcome nationalism. On the other hand, there is Middle East, which of course always gives away freedom for the sake of identity, fundamentalism. And here is Israel state which insists we are part of free world. Whether you want or not, we are part of your world. But we are national state, and it becomes less and less popular to be national state. And we say we are part of Middle East. Whether we want or not, we are part of Middle East, but we are democracy. So we go against two streams at the same time. And that's how, why I felt almost immediately, and feel that this day, that Israel has absolutely unique role in today's world, because it is the role of Israel is to connect two basic desires of people and to keep them together: national identity and freedom.
Your support for freedom and democracy in the Middle East has been steady,
Yeah.
but it's also been challenged by people who say, yeah, well, look around. They tried it in Egypt, they tried it briefly in Syria. It always leads to disaster. I'm not sure you're the only person in Israel who still believes in freedom and democracy for Arab countries. There might be another one. I haven't met him yet. But do you still? I mean, is that your view, for example, of Egypt?
Well, of course I'm still, look, those people who say that there is no, let's put it differently. What I'm saying, and I wrote it in my books, is that there are no people who want to live under dictatorship. The phenomenon of doublethink, it means that people who live under dictatorship, in fact, don't believe into this dictatorship. They think differently, but they're afraid to speak. It's universal phenomena. It's a universal phenomenon for all communist parties, for all the dictatorial regimes in the Middle East. And what happened in Egypt is on Tahrir Square. If you Google Tahrir Square and, let's say, Palestinian revolution, you'll find zero connections. Tahrir Square and struggle against Muslim brothers, almost zero connection. You'll write, speaking your mind freely. That's what all they were saying, that how long we can be forbidden to speak our mind freely. So it is universal. It's universal in every culture. People in the end they don't want that others will tell them what to think. Having said that, between this and democracy, and here, by the way, your former boss, President Bush, who was by far the best bookseller of my book, The Case for Democracy, no, he really liked this book and was promoting it. It helped a lot for this book to become bestseller, but there was one small point on which we disagreed. Because you remember when we met and he said, I have a headache, I read until the page 214. And it's very unfortunate because on page 215 I was explaining that elections are not democracy. And here we really disagreed with him. He believed that if you only will reach elections in Egypt, in Iraq, everywhere, that will be democracy. But elections is not democracy. Democracy is free elections and free society. And that's for sure is a process. It can take, by the way, sometimes hundreds of years. The problem is that the world and the West wants peace immediately, now. What was Oslo? Why 10 days after Oslo, I wrote my first article against Oslo? Because the idea of Oslo was, we'll take Arafat, he is a dictator, he is a strong dictator, and he will be our dictator because we'll make him corrupt dictator. And we will bring him to Palestine, and we say to Palestinians, now he is your boss. Take it or leave it, he is your boss. Rabin said it very clearly. He said, without Supreme Court, human rights organizations, and free press, Arafat will defeat Hamas much easier than we. So here is our subcontractor, Arafat, who will keep his people under corrupt dictatorship and will bring us peace. That's when I wrote that whether we want or not, next generation of Palestinians will hate us more, because that is the nature of dictatorship. He cannot survive differently. Now, you can say, okay, but you see, it doesn't happen. In Syria, in Egypt, it didn't happen. You say, what the free world did in order to happen? there were, and there still are, democratic dissidents among Egyptians, among Syrians, among Libyans, among Iraqis, among Iranians. There are in huge numbers. If you remember, we brought President Bush on our meeting in Prague in 2007
Yes, yeah.
with democratic dissidents from all Middle East.
Yeah.
Was the free world, well, Bush was exception. He was the one who was ready to meet, he met more than 100 dissidents. But, by the way, from this point, there is no difference between Obama and between Trump. They're not meeting dissidents. They're not supporting dissidents. They say, why? Obama was saying engagement. Engagement is the most important thing, and that's why he really betrayed the Iranian Revolution. I then called to his speechwriter on democracy, who later became an ambassador, and I said, this statement of president at the time when millions are thinking whether to cross this line between doublethink and dissent, that the president says, in fact, stay at home. He said, for us, engagement with the regime is more important than changing of the regime. That's what says the leader of the free world. It was like the biggest betrayal. So, but if you'll take on much more small, whenever I was coming with Bassam Aid, Palestinian who was in B'Tselem and then decided we also have to watch for monitoring of human rights of Palestinian Authority. So we, by the way, then in Shalem, we had some program supporting democratic education through him in some Arab schools, and I come to European Union. And they just now passed a great program of supporting democratic education in Arab countries. They say, you know, here is this guy, oh, yes, this is wonderful. So we'll give some money for teaching in the Arab Palestinian school democracy, because it's strange that we Zionists have to raise money for this. And they say, oh, of course, it's great, but what Abu Mazen will say? I said, I didn't ask him, but for sure he's against, because he hates his dissidents. Every dictator hates dissidents. And oh, no. We decided in the European Union, we are supporting only projects that Abu Mazen will support. The same, by the way, today about Egypt.
Yes.
Absolutely the same. If the CCC will not say, okay, America and Israel will never support any democratic dissident in Egypt. That is so imagine for a moment, you just now gave a lecture about Soviet Union. If before demonstrating and supporting for Sakharov, or for me, or for that, they'll say, we have to check with Brezhnev. But that's exactly how the free world behaves about any democratic forces in the Middle East. So is it easy? No. But do we have any other ally or any other way to bring peace, but not through strengthening democratic institutions? I believe we don't have any other way.
Let me ask you, taking off from Brezhnev, to turn to Russia for a minute. Because Russia seemed to be coming out of dictatorship and moving toward democracy. And now we have Putin.
Yeah.
So one question is, what do you make of Putin? Do you know him? Have you met him?
Yeah, I met him many times. Yeah. There was first years of his power when we were on his initiative, by the way, and we were on very good terms. But now I believe that every meeting with him will be like a shame in the eyes of my dissident friends. That's why it's more difficult now. But Putin, well, I would say, as an activist of human rights movement, I can say nothing good about Putin. As an activist of Soviet Jewry movement, and later the head of Jewish Agency, and we have a huge operation in Russia, I can say a lot of good things. For the first time in 1,000 years of history, of Russia, the one who is the leader is not anti-Semite. And maybe even more. He has a sympathy to Jews. He has stories about his neighbors in St. Petersburg and how he loved and they loved. Well, even every anti-Semite has his stories about Jews. So, but he somehow, I had a lot of conversation with him in the beginning, the first years of his power, about Iran. And all what he said me about this was not true. But conversations about Jews, he told me then, it is such a mistake that we, our leaders in the Soviet Union, were against Jewish communities. They believed it is dangerous. I believe it is very good for us. And I have to say, he does support Jewish communities. Now, having said all this, that you should have absolutely no mistake. He has good attitude to Jews. He looks on Israel as a Jewish Russian-speaking state, and that's why he has a lot of sympathy to it. Having said all this, he has his strategic interest. His strategic interest is against America, and that's why Iran and Syria are his most important cards in this. And just recently, we saw how easy the fact that president thinks some positive things about Jews doesn't mean that all his people will not use the most primitive anti-Semitic prejudices to support their policy. Look what happened with this airplane. That, in fact, Putin tried to play it down, saying, okay, everybody made mistakes and so on. And Bibi sent the leader of our air forces. They gave all the information. After this, the head of the Red Army, no, the minister of the defense, accuses Israel, in fact, that our soldiers, our planes, were hiding behind the Russian airplane, and that's why they provoked its bringing down. It goes straight to the most primitive anti-Semitic feeling that Jews at the time of war with Hitler were hiding in Tashkent behind the chest of Russian soldiers. So everybody in Russia understands what it means. So in pursuing their strategic interests, they will not hesitate to use the most primitive anti-Semitic formulas. At the same time, I'd say at this stage, we have very good relations. We continue bringing at least 7,000 Jews from Russia and another 7,000 Jews from Ukraine every year on Aliyah, another 15,000 on different programs, and we are keeping very good relations with the Jewish communities. So that's unique. From the point of democracy, it's a huge setback, no doubt.
You still have hope for the future of Russia after
What
Putin?
means still? Did I ever have such a hope?
Did you ever have such a hope? I mean, you were involved in the Soviet human rights movement with Sakharov.
No, I believe in Sakharov. I believe in Dostoevsky. I believe in Tolstoy. When KGB tried to tell me, we gave you such an education, you this and this, and you betrayed, I told them usually, what, you want to say that Russian literature is your literature? But that Dostoevsky and Pushkin are on your side, they're on my side. What do you think? So I'm not ready to give it to them. The Russian intelligentsia is an absolutely unique phenomenon. Absolutely. I think it's very interesting. Like in every generation, there is one or two Sakharovs, and it's outstanding people in moral standing and so on. But Russia as society, no, I don't believe that it has any future now.
Go back to the years at the Jewish Agency. You said at one point that correct me if this is wrong, the era of mass aliyah is over. There are people coming every year.
No. I will never say that the era of mass aliyah is over. I always hope that all of you who are spending your miserable life in America, when they understand how miserable it is. I really believe that life in Israel is a gift of God to us, and it's so enjoyable. But I don't believe that we need commissars of Zionism who go all over the world and say, make Aliyah. And I am now waiting with fear that how, because of this awful thing which happened in Pittsburgh, some of our ministers will start shouting to American Jews immediately to go on Aliyah. Because that's exactly where my disagreement with them was. We came together with Bibi after Toulouse, to France, and maybe my good friend and leader, he says to French Jews, that's your time all to leave and to come. And then journalists look at me, and I stand there, and I refuse to say it. And they say, so we have a head of Jewish agency who is anti-Zionist. And so, no. I said, I don't believe that it makes even one person to come. And especially at the time of terrorist attack, that to say it means to say that Israel is a kind of shelter. Israel is not a kind of shelter. Israel can give you quality of life which you cannot have in any other place. And that must be our power. Shelter can be in Miami too. It's, so that's my position. That, so as long as you look at America's shelter, you can say here. But at some moment, start thinking about some better quality of life. But so what I really did say, that in Jewish agency, when it came, Jewish agency was all about aliyah, aliyah, aliyah. And I'm very proud that this organization, which 3.5 million Jews made aliyah through Jewish agency. I said, aliyah of escape is almost finished, where you are saving Jews from pogroms. Of course, we have some Jews from Iran, and very special operation was just in these years from Yemen and from some others. But mainly it's aliyah of free choice. And aliyah of free choice, people are doing not because some commissar of Zionism came and told them to do it. They're doing it because they decide that it's their home. So you have to strengthen their identity. The central word is identity. If you want that there'll be more aliyah, there should be more Jews. Because what to do? Aliyah, Jews are making aliyah. It means that there must be more people who are connected to tradition, to history, to community, and to the state of Israel. And that's what the revolution which I did in that very rigid, very powerful, but very rigid organization was, I brought down the wall between the world of Aliyah and the world of Jewish education. I said one is coming out from the other. And as a result, we stopped, I would say, very stupid wars. Let's say Novosibirsk, or some place in Russia. There is Shaliach of Aliyah and Shaliach of Jewish education. Both are coming from the same organization, but from different departments. And both are fighting one with the other because they have opposite aims. That is stopped. Now the new shlichim, they even don't know that there was such a problem because they are at the same time shaliach of fighting anti-Semitism, shaliach aliyah, and shaliach of Jewish education. They're representing Jews who are in Zion to Jews who are not yet in Zion. That's the idea of revolution.
The idea of Jewish identity is a wonderful place to stop. We are out of time for this part of the session, so I would just ask you to,
that's why we have
you can have some more dessert, to join me in thanking Natan.